Hey everyone, my name's Tony, and today I just want to talk about skill-based matchmaking versus engagement-oriented or engagement-optimized matchmaking, specifically in Marvel Rivals. Now, at a very high level, skill-based matchmaking takes a pool of players and tries to match them as close as possible to have even teams, and engagement-optimized matchmaking does a very similar thing, but it just takes into account more factors. The biggest complaint I've seen online about EOMM is that the games seem rigged and that you're either destined to win or lose based on an algorithm, which isn't necessarily true. And this, in my opinion, is not actually the biggest issue with Marvel Rivals, but I will say that engagement optimized matchmaking is more noticeable game to game or more noticeable in like small gaming sessions, say 10 games or so. Well, 10 games could be a lot depending on the game, but it's just more noticeable in small numbers, I should say. So to kind of show the differences between the two, I did make this Python script that's on screen now. It is very brute force, it's not highly optimized, but what it essentially does is it simulates 100 players playing 100 games regardless of their rank and compares the differences between EOMM versus SBMM. So I'm going to go ahead and run this in the background real quick because it does take a minute. Like I said, it's brute force, so it's not the fastest in the world. But let's just go over it while it's running in the background, and then we'll go over the results when it's done. So, like I said, it takes 100 players playing 100 games. And what I have is this matchmaking restriction and a streak restriction. So the matchmaking restriction says, hey, if you go in and your MMR is 1,000, and I may say MMR or ELO or anything like that, I have this reference sheet here just so you can kind of see how it's all plotted out. Eternity and one above all may or may not be correct, but the rest of these should be about 100 points difference between one another. And just kind of what I'm using as a guide. So let's say you're 1,000 MMR, which would put you at Plat 2. It's going to match people within 300 elo of you. So if you're Plat 2, it'll go from Gold 2 to Diamond 2. But what I have in here is a limit. So every time after your rank is chosen, you get added to the pool, and then it starts searching for other players within this 300. Well, when it picks the next player, it's going to adjust either the new min or the new max. So if you're 1,000, and let's say the next player is Diamond 2 at 1,300, well, now they can only pick between these two, just to try and keep it fair. So after it's chosen the other players to match you with, it then needs to put you into teams. And how I have this set up is this is the brute force part of it. What it does is it takes the 12 players and kind of just cycles through them until it gets two teams that are as close as possible with MMR on each team. Once it does that, I then take the
You like taking the nuts to the face, hun?
sums of the MMR for both teams, and then I say, okay, whoever has, and this is very simplistic, obviously a lot more goes into this, but whoever has the highest MMR, that's who I give the win to. If the MMR is exactly even, then it's just a coin toss. Okay, and now the only difference between skill-based matchmaking and EOMM is that I'm also tracking your win streaks and loss streaks. If you have, and this is set to 4, which means as soon as you get your fourth win, it's just going to flip it. So if you get your fourth win in a row, the EOMM is just going to say, nope, your fourth win was actually a loss. And if you get 4 losses in a row, it's actually going to say, nope, your fourth loss is actually a win. So it's just going to flip it for EOMM. That's the only difference between these two simulations. And then after it runs the 100 players for 100 games, it actually gets the average of all of them, and then that's what's going to be printed on screen right now. Now, as you can see, if you just look at the results, they're actually really, really close. This is a 1% difference. So yeah, it looks like EOMM is slightly rigged, but I mean, a 1% difference really isn't that bad. But again, I don't think this is the actual problem that Marvel Rivals is facing. But I just wanted to kind of demonstrate this, using, and again, this is very simplistic, very brute force. This is not going to take into account all the different factors, but it just gives you kind of a good idea. So even if every fourth game is rigged to guarantee, if you're on a winning streak or a losing streak, it's not changing the outcome all that much. It really is more based on all the different factors of, are you playing your main character? How is the team synergy? How is everybody feeling, mentally? Like it's there's a lot of other things that go into this that you can't really account for, but just root level, if it was rigging games, the end result is pretty much the same. And I can run this again with, say, you can only have 2 win streaks, and we'll just see the difference. So I'll do that. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and do that now and let that run. So we'll just change this to 3, which means if you get 2, then the third one, if it was going to, like, you lose 2 games, if the third one was going to be a loss, it'll go ahead and flip it. So I'll run this in the background. All right. So as we can see here, it's a little bit wider of a gap. It's about a 1.5% roughly. But again, that's not that far off. There could be a lot of other factors. And this is saying that if you were about to get your third loss or your third win, it's going to rig it, but you still actually come out on top on average. And again, this doesn't take into account everything, but it's still a pretty good indication that these systems are actually pretty close together over a long period, over a large sample size. Now let's move on to what I believe the actual problem that Marvel Rivals is facing. And I believe that that is how much MMR they are giving and taking per match. Again, just using this as a reference, this is kind of how I'm basing the MMR, but let's look at this script here. Now, this script is a little more simplistic. It just does one thing only. How many games did you play? What is your starting rank? And what is your win-loss percentage? Now, what I have down here, and this is based on what I've seen, it's kind of anecdotal. I would need a lot more data, but it seems like if you're under 1200 MR, you can kind of gain about 30 MMR per win. You lose about 15 on average, like no matter what MMR you were in. I saw a pretty standard 15, maybe 20 at most. But if you're under 1200 MMR, and 1200, keep in mind, is Diamond 3. If you're under Diamond, you gain about 30 per match. And then if you're under 1500, which is Grandmaster, you gain about 25 per match. And then if you're under Celestial, you gain about 20 per match. And then after that, it's about 15 and 15. So you can actually climb with a negative win rate. So I decided to put the player starting at 700 MMR, which is gold 2. And I said, okay, well, if you have a 55% win rate and you play 100 games, what does that look like? And I wanted to base this on normal games that give you about 15 per win and take away about 15 per loss. Now, games aren't quite this strict where they give you and take away the exact same amount. If you win more games, you typically gain more points. If you start going on a losing streak, you'll lose more points, but usually it kind of evens out around the same amount of points. So I'm just using 15 to kind of as a baseline for typical games. Let's go ahead and run this. Let me pull it up here. And we'll see. And again, it's going to just take 100 random wins and losses, and it's just going to give you a 55% win rate, and we'll just see where you end up if you started at 700. So that is this one. So if you see in Marvel Rivals, if you started at 700 and you had a 55% win rate, you go up to 1540. That puts you in Grandmaster 3. Whereas a typical system puts you at about 850. You go from gold 2 to gold 1 with the 55% win rate. Now, again, this probably isn't quite right. If I'm being more realistic, I would probably say you gain maybe about 18, even 20, and you would lose about 15 for most games. But it just kind of gives you a good idea. So we'll just run it exact same. Go here. And this is probably a little bit more realistic. But again, it's a 55% win rate, but look how big the gap is between, say, a normal game and Marvel Rivals. This to me is the actual problem, because let me just break this down a little bit more. What if we put you at a 40% win rate? Now, in most games, you go down in rank if you have a 40% win rate, or even a 45% win rate. You go down. But in Marvel Rivals, you don't. You start at 700, and in a normal game at a 45% win rate, you go down a little bit. But in Marvel Rivals, you went up almost 500 points with a 45% win rate over the course of 100 games. This is the real problem that Marvel Rival has. it's giving too many points. It's just too lenient. And this doesn't even take into account the I believe they're called the chrono tokens, where you can just prevent losing any MMR, which means that you can actually go even lower win rate and still rank up. And obviously, I'm not accounting for that. But look, if you start at 700, you have a 40% win rate. You drop down to 520 in a normal game, which reasonable. You have a 40% win rate. You shouldn't be where you are. But in Marvel Rivals, you went up 300 points. So you started at Gold 2 and you climbed all the way to Plat 2 with a 40% win rate. To me, this is the issue that Marvel Rivals has. This is what needs to be fixed. They're too generous with their points. And again, this is kind of anecdotal. This is what I found online and looking at other people's profiles and just looking at their competitive games. This is what Marvel Rivals needs to fix in order to make the game actually competitive and to make the games fair. This is why games vary so wildly, because you can have somebody who's not that good get to high ranks. You can have somebody who would be, say, a gold player in Overwatch, kind of an average player, but they can hit diamond, even potentially grandmaster with a losing streak. Or not a losing streak, but like a losing win record. You know, they can be under 50% and still keep climbing and climbing. And then next thing you know, you're actually a decent player who climbed to grandmaster off of your skill, and they climbed off of, you know, just sheer luck or how the game is designed, and you're matched together, and that's why your games feel so different, because y'all really aren't in the same skill bracket, but the game put you in the same skill bracket. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I just wanted to go over the skill-based matchmaking and the engagement optimized matchmaking and just kind of go over the differences and similarities, and also talk about what I believe the real problem of Marvel Rivals is. If you stuck around to the end, I appreciate it. Have a damn good day, everyone.